Hello and welcome to the Green Profit Academy Pros Podcast. This show digs into the challenges in growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit. I'm Christeen Era.
And I'm Steve Bousquet. We are the green industry experts in profit, growth, and leadership. Hello, Christine. How are you today?
I'm doing good. It's right before fall. Fall is one of my absolute favorite seasons of the year. So I'm excited for, the weather to start shifting a little bit, colors to start popping up. I'm not a pumpkin latte person, but all those people love all those pumpkin lattes and pumpkin this and that. So
Spice pumpkin, right? That's when you know the fall's here. Yeah, I live in New England. I live in Connecticut, and the leaves have just started to turn a little bit this week. Fall starts officially this weekend, so everything will be pumpkin spice, everything. Absolutely. This week's podcast is turning core values into boundaries in small business.
Yeah, I like this topic. It's something I think that we've talked about a lot, and I think it's so many different ways. So I wanted to kind of bring it to the table and talk about how does this happen? The core values in our company are so important. We also refer to them at that higher level, immutable laws, as we're working with businesses to move through and establish their strategic business plan. So they need to have those along with their mission, vision, and purpose. And there's kind of this gap, I think, that happens. So this is, an opportunity to see how do we bring all that work that we did, establishing that and building boundaries around them in our company, because that really helps, support that foundation that we're working on when we're looking at, what do we believe in? How does it show up?
So for this podcast, when you hear core values or immutable laws, that's going to be an exchangeable term, right? So it means the same thing when we're saying that. And so we'll dive into kind of what that means. So it's something that we use in our strategic development program, in our emerging leader program. We use it in our, part of our retreat. We use it in all of our coaching. We develop the immutable laws, the mission, vision, and purpose, and that helps the owner have that strategic plan for 1 year and for 5 years. It helps the owner, focus. It helps the owner attract and develop talent based on these hit their mission, vision, and purpose. Mm-hmm. And the immutable laws it's a powerful tool. Tell us a little bit more about the immutable laws. How is that developed, and what do they look like?
Yeah. So the immutable laws, these and the, core values basically in your business, these really support what you stand for. It's not just supporting the culture in your company. That's one thing it does, but it also helps the people who work in your company understand what are the limits? If we're going to approach this, what's the rules, of the company, the basic rules. It also connects with the right people that you're going to serve. So it's, it faces internal and supports that. And it's also external to where it supports the people that you serve and how you serve them. So it could be things, that a business stands for, let's say integrity, quality, communication, being innovative. We have some of our clients are even, one of theirs is be early is on time is late.
On
right?
time is late. Yeah.
Yes. So you all better be there, 5 minutes early, whatever it is. So we have these values that we establish in our company, and they support more, they're not just words, right, that we're going to stick on the wall or put in a handbook. They really support the purpose and the intention and even the expectations that we desire in our company and pretty much every facet of the business.
So just to share, some immutable laws might sound like this, right? We do what we say we're going to do when we say we're going to do them. So that's one of the things, right? We say we're going to do something, and we say we're going to do it at a certain time, and we do that thing when we're supposed to do it, right? It's be honest, right? So if you do something wrong, or you do something right, you're honest about it, right? So if you break something or you don't meet a deadline, you're just honest about it. So your team knows what the expectation is and your clients know what the expectation is. Being on time is a big thing, because if people are waiting for you, there's a reason for that. So being respectful of other people's time is another thing. Being polite is another immutable law, right? So that means even when you don't feel good or you're tired at the end of the day, you're still polite to your team members, your clients, customers, and even vendors. So those are some immutable laws, and they go through your whole life. Really, it's who you are. It's who the company is. So these are just some. Each company should have immutable laws, and because you want to hire people on your team who share these immutable laws. So if we're hiring people who don't share these immutable laws, and then we have problems when they're on our team, there's your sign, right? They were not going to match up. And before we had in my company immutable laws, we had, more turnover. And then once we had immutable laws, we share them right up front with people before they can join our team. And if they don't agree with them, they won't join the team. And if they agree with them, then we move forward in the hiring process. But they have to agree with the immutable laws before they can join the team.
Yeah. And the immutable laws, it helps. I love it because once we get them established, and I work with, our clients through this to where we say, use them up front as a filter. And these can be used in marketing. They can be used in recruitment. They could be used in so many places in the business, but it acts as that filter as people, whether you're doing sales or you're doing recruitment, you're inviting the right people to show up that already is a good match for you because they relate with these core values and these immutable laws, and they're on the same page. So that's one of the reasons, why it's so important to have these. And these are what's going to help you establish, what your boundaries are in your business. So, and everybody knows they're on the same page, what's acceptable and what isn't acceptable. So like Steve, you were saying, be respectful, in your communication. So if someone isn't being respectful in their communication, that's breaking that value. Be on time. If they're not on time, hey, this is one of our core values. You're not on time. You're late. That's violating a core value. Be responsible. Like do the right thing even when it's hard, right? So if somebody's cutting corners in your business and they're not performing out in the field like you expect them to, this is a value that you could bring up and say, hey, this is one of our core values. But people who like to cut corners, if you have these core values out there, they're not likely going to want to work at your company.
Right. So you want to get that right up front because you don't want to not share that. And then all of a sudden people are like, oh, that was never explained to me. And even clients, right? We want to make sure our clients understand what our core values are up front, right? Mm-hmm. Like we do not want rude clients. It's not mentally healthy to have rude clients dealing with our team, right? So if we have clients that are consistently rude, they're swearing at our team, they're rude all the time. Every time they call up, it's like a traumatic experience because they're just such jerks to our team. That's not acceptable. That goes against our immutable laws. As owners or managers, if we're allowing clients to treat our team like that goes against our immutable laws. So we want to make sure, and we have to stand up for our team members, and vice versa. Our team has to treat our clients with that respect and politeness. So it's a two-way street. Same thing with vendors. If vendors make promises and they're not living up to it, then we have to let our vendors know our immutable laws are: you're going to do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. And we're going to also do that. In other words, we're going to pay our bills on time because we told you we were going to do that. And so our vendors are not calling us up and chasing their money. So it's really, it takes a lot of stress out of the business. And that's why it's important to have the immutable laws and create these boundaries.
Yeah. So even if you haven't spent that time to identify them, if you just did a little bit of reflection, you'd probably realize, just taking a second now and think, what are the things that are non-negotiable for me as a business owner, as a leader? What are those? And it could be something, like, let's say integrity is non-negotiable for you, and realizing, how deeply that may be now embedded just because that's one of your values, even if you haven't written them down in your customer service process. So these could be things that you are already doing and they're already in your business, but they're not clearly articulated and being communicated as, integrity is a core value of ours or immutable law. And this is what I mean by that. So even if you haven't put them down yet, you have them. So definitely take the time to sit down and connect with those and figure out, what are they? And, how can I communicate them to make sure that they're clear?
Yeah. And, we don't want too many. So I like between 5 and 7. And even my own that, we had 8 and then we shrunk it down to 7. Now we have 6, because they start to sound a lot alike, right?
Yeah.
We want to make sure that people can remember them. And that it doesn't sound like marching orders. We need them to make sense. The other thing is, and I'm working on this now, is, right, what do they look like and what do they feel like? Because when our immutable laws are being broken, it does not feel good. Like, we know it. We know when our immutable laws are being broken at work because there's tension, there's chaos. We bring it home. It wakes us up at 2:00 in the morning. It's that employee that we're waking up in the middle of the night. It's the client that is waking us up in the middle of the night. It's the person that we're bringing that person home and talking about it to our spouse. And our spouse has already heard it enough. And my wife has a rule. If I bring it home and I talk about it 3 times, I either have to stop talking about it or get rid of the client or the employee. So, and that's the immutable law, saying I'm not holding that person to the company immutable laws. So there's my sign. So what does it look like, that immutable law, and what does it feel like when it's broken? And it's pretty powerful in really putting that next to our immutable laws to just say, hey, when this goes off course, it's like the GPS, right? Turn around, do a U-turn. This is what it looks like and sounds like when it's off course.
Yeah. And I would say, definitely don't have less than 3. And 5 is kind of that sweet spot, because then it could, get too many. We want them to where our team can remember them, and, they're simple. So that's kind of how, when people go, well, how many should I have? Or I'm struggling, or I have 12. It's like, okay, well, let's try to get that down to, maybe 5, is kind of a nice number. Or they're like, well, I could only think of 2. Well, we want definitely more than 2. So not less than 3, and, kind of 5 is that sweet spot for your business. And they might be saying the same things, just in a different way. So it could be easy, to bring it down. And with these, like, we have these core values, we have these immutable laws, and we say, okay, this is kind of what we stand for. These are our non-negotiables. Next, you want to set those clear expectations with our team. So we can take those values and look at them and start identifying, like, what are the expectations for these to be met? And one of the things that I suggest, and I created this years ago in my business, is a code of conduct, right? So that code of conduct, it's built off of those immutable laws, and it quickly helps my team understand, okay, so we have these values that this company stands for. What does this look like? What's some acceptable and non-acceptable behavior that might fall kind of like, reading between the lines of these immutable laws? Because we want these immutable laws to, make a short statement of what we stand for, not too wordy. So that code of conduct expands it, and it helps make it very clear as a business what's acceptable and what isn't. What are the expectations when we say on time is late? If that's one of them. Do the right thing even when it's hard. What does that mean? Because, less words leaves lots of room for interpretation. if we expand on that, to a code of conduct and kind of give them a one sheet, I wouldn't say do not make it 2 or 5 sheets, just a one sheet, simple code of conduct. What statements can we make that really support these immutable laws and, these expectations? It's going to help the team be able to implement these and fall within these guidelines, have a deeper understanding of what that means. So that's something that you can implement as the next step to have everybody on the same page, is this code of conduct.
And the more clear you make it for your team members and even your clients and your vendors, the less stress there is and the less struggle around it up front. The more clear the expectations up front, they're like, okay, these are the rules. This is the code of conduct. People are like, oh, people actually will embrace that up front because people want to know how to play the game. They want to know how to behave.
Yeah, it gives them those guardrails,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Like the immutable laws, is the road, the code of conduct is the guardrails. So it helps them, okay, I'm staying in my own lane as a contributing team member, or, what does that look like?
Right. Like, hey, show up with your uniform on. What does that look like? This is a picture of someone in their uniform. Oh, you mean completely dressed with both the pants and the shirt and the hat that is the company hat? Yes. Okay. And one of the things that's why I was like, what does it look like? Because there's so many visual learners and everything is so visual now. Show me is a big thing. Tell me is how it used to be. Show me now is really video. You have TikTok and, everything Pinterest and Facebook and Instagram. And there's even different settings for each one of those platforms. It's all, people are not writing a lot of content in TikTok. They want a video. Instagram is show me the photo. So using photos as examples is very powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is a good point, because I don't like a lot of words. I don't want to read a lot of things, kind of more than 3 or 4 lines. And I'm like, oh, that's just too much. Like, I'd rather watch a video or listen to it. So because I want to also be doing something else. But that's a good point, is some of us are visual learners. Some of us like to read. So giving them something in writing and then also maybe a video or something is a really great suggestion. And it doesn't have to be difficult. Like, you could always make it better later, but get something together now and improve upon it over time. So we want to look at these core values and this code of conduct that you bring together as kind of a map in creating your policies and your processes and your guidelines in your business when it comes to the operations of the business, decision making of the business. You're going to pull them into those policies and those procedures and see, do we have a policy? Like, easy example, on time is late. Do we have a policy that supports that core value? Do we have something that talks about, what you need to do? What are the boundaries of being on time or being late? Does that mean that you want them to call in at least an hour at minimum before they know that they're not going to be on time? Do you want them, to call in an hour minimum if they know that they're not going to be at work? What is that? What are your expectations around that? And then what are the consequences? So if they're violating this and they're showing up 5-10 minutes late consistently, what are the tiered consequences that you have outlined that says, hey, in this policy, if you're late once, it's a verbal warning. Twice, it's a written warning. 3 times, you're on probation, for 30 days. And if you violate it, then you're terminated. Like, what is your policy that's going to support this immutable law? So you're really looking at what your values are and making sure that you have policies or even processes in place that can support these So you can pull it out in black and white and say, hey, this is our company policy. This is what supports how we do what we do and how we show up when we do it.
So why is that so important, right? So Joey Coleman wrote best-selling book, right? Never lose an employee again, right? So why do we want to keep our team? Because we spent all this money recruiting, training. In the book, he says it costs 1 to 3 times their annual salary to replace them because of lost productivity and training. So if you're paying someone $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year, it's going to cost, if you're paying $50,000, it's going to cost between $50,000 and $150,000 to replace them. So if they're late, so you're like, okay, write you up, warning, termination after 3 lates, right? Or what's a different story? Okay, you're late. Now we have to have the you're late conversation. Let's get that written ahead of time. Now you're late twice. All right. So now we have the you're late twice conversation. What's your plan around that? Now we have you're late 3 times. Okay, now what's the story? You're late 3 times plan, right? Is there a re-education? Now we have to go through onboarding again and go over the immutable laws. And do you understand it and what that looks like? So because we need a plan, because you're going to have people that are late. About 1/3, I visited dozens and dozens of businesses. About 1/3 of your population is going to be the late people. And there's about 1/3 that are always on time. And there's 1/3 that are mostly on time. So if that's one of your immutable laws, and it is for my company, you're going to have that conversation. We know we have the lates. So we're coaching and guiding them all of the time. So because we know we don't want to spend $150,000. So we're going to have to coach and guide them all the time to be on time. And they have their plans, and we have to talk about this all the time. And we just know that's going to be one of the things. But going up front, they don't feel picked on now because they understand it's part of our immutable laws. We have a coaching program for it. But we know that we have to do that up front. And we know no matter what happens, and it doesn't matter whether you have 5 or 50 employees, there's always that 1/3 that are going to struggle with whatever immutable law it is. They're you're going to have to coach them right up front, because there's no perfect employee for everything that we need.
Yeah. And we don't want to make an exception, right? So we can't continue to make an exception for people who aren't showing up on time. So the intention is to educate them, train them. It's about raising their awareness and coaching them. So we look at these, when people violate, let's say, a core value or a policy in the company, it's a coaching opportunity. And really what I've discovered over time is people have good intentions. The people that are working at our company, most of the time, really, they have good intentions. They want to show up. They want to do a good job. So it's something that either they're unaware, right? They don't know. There's something that they're not kind of connecting the dots, whether it's like in their strengths, it's not something they're great at, but there's some sort of unawareness, or maybe they just haven't been taught yet. So making sure that we coach and train our team and look for those coaching opportunities, and having these in our policies, these values kind of weaved through our policies and processes in the business, it gives us so much more opportunity to reflect back on, hey, what's in writing? Why does this matter, right? Why is it important that we're on time? Why do I have to have conversations with you? And we're not just trying to get them to obey the rules. It's not like a bunch of children where we're saying, hey, these are the rules, and if you break them, you're going to be in trouble. No, we want to empower them to know what's expected and coach them and get them to that point to where maybe they're not late anymore. What are the challenges around you being late? Tell me about that. Okay, so I ask about this because we have a policy, and this policy ties back to our core value. And if we educate them and raise their awareness and have these coaching conversations, we're empowering them and investing in them. We're not micromanaging them. So we're inviting them to be a part of a team that has this culture where there's this accountability level, because we've provided that platform for them to succeed there.
And this is the late thing is just an example. We're not going to beat this to death, but as the coaching opportunity that comes up is, so they're late, right? So now you're like, okay, so what's the plan? You give them the opportunity to develop their own plan. Then they're late again. So now you're like, okay, so we're going to help you reverse engineer this. So we know what are the challenges with being on time. So you can start asking them questions like, what time do you have to leave your house to make it here on time? They're like, oh, I don't know that. And you say, okay, how long does it take you to get to work? So not everybody, especially there are certain employees, they don't have certain work-life skills. So they're like, well, it takes 30 minutes. Okay. So that means you have to leave a half of an hour, 30 minutes before you need to be here. Oh yeah. So you could set your alarm before you need to go, but set it 40 minutes. Oh, I could do that. So we try that. And then if that doesn't work, we try other things. So you get them to the point where they're mostly consistently on time. And then you're like, let's go talk we're going to have you mentored by somebody on the team who's always early. And then that person coaches them. So then now they have an on-time buddy. Mm-hmm. And then you help them understand the reason that you need to be on time is because we've told clients that you're going to be there at a certain time of the day. They're putting their dog in the house. They're coming home from work to put their dog in the house so you can treat their lawn. That's why it's important for you to be on time. And then their mind is blown. They did not put that together. So that's what I mean. It's continually coaching these people to understand the value of that, what that is. So they're not just being on time now. They're actually helping that dog not be uncomfortable being stuck in the house, helping the client, serving the client who's coming all the way home to put the dog away so they can treat the lawn. So everything changes. And that's why just having it as a policy sometimes, some people will get it right away. And some people need to understand, oh, okay, that's what's really going on. That's what this is really about. And that's why that continued training, might need a little more mentoring. They might need to know the why, the dog, and they love dogs. So they don't want the dog to be uncomfortable, or they don't want people to be put out because of they're coming all the way home. So understanding more. And you want to get to the point where it's not an issue, and it might take a little more time for other people, but just realize that, and you shouldn't make exceptions. Just realize that there is going to be a certain portion of your team you're going to have to spend more time educating. I had Steve with Green Profit Academy. I was just reading a Harvard Business Review study that showed people who have written down goals and plans make 10 times more money over a 10-year period than people who don't write their goals and plans down. And really, that's why I'm so excited to announce the Green Profit Academy Mind Your Own Business Retreat. This is going to be the third retreat we're putting on. It's going to be held in Granville, Tennessee at the Wildwood Resort and Marina. It's going to be on November 4th to November 8th. And we're going to work on not only your 1 year, but your 1 to 5 year business plan and goals. So you're going to be so far ahead of people who don't have written down goals and plans. We are doing this because we want your business to be far more successful than you ever imagined. And it all starts with goals and plans. So join us this year, November 4th to November 8th, for the Mind Your Own Business Retreat. Let's see. Come on, sign up. I'm going to put the link to sign up in the show notes, and I look forward to seeing you there. It's time to get serious about your business. Now's the time to start.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a really good point, right? That you're saying, like, you're talking about raising their awareness.
Yes.
And as a business owner or a leader, and it's like, I could hear my dad in my head, like, why don't they just know? Like, they should know this. They should show, this is what they should do. Or, and that's a very easy kind of default mindset to just kind of be like, they should be like me. This is what I do. They should do the same thing. How do they not know? Everybody should know this. And sure, you can have those conversations, but I guarantee they're not going to get you where you need to go. Right. So we need to have another conversation with ourselves. And I'm speaking from experience, because that was definitely me, where I was like, well, if I know, like, they should know, like, what's their problem? And then I started becoming more aware around, okay, well, who's on my team? I don't have people on my team that are like me for a reason, because I'm here and I take up that space. So the other people that show up are different from me. So they can do the other things that I don't want to do, or that I don't enjoy doing, that they may enjoy. So we can't expect everybody to think like ourselves. And we may need to explain things differently because they can't get there themselves. And that's okay, because if you reflect back, I'm sure there's experiences in your life that you may have not been able to get there by yourself as well, right? Totally different topic, but we've all had that, right? It's something to where we're like, well, I just don't understand that. Some of these things that people struggle to understand are life skills, or, thinking about other people's needs, or what's that future outcome? How am I impacting that? And so these are where we're talking about like the coachable moments. And there's so much opportunity there, because we could have some really great people on our team that just need some conversation to help them better understand. So I think that was a really great example that you shared, Steve, on, let's start with where you start in the morning. Now let's end with, how does this impact our customer and their life?
Yeah, and sometimes they just don't see the big picture, right? It could be tires, right? I love tire gauges because I can measure. I buy them by the dozens, and they're so easy to lose. You just measure how much tread is on your tire, right? And it's because I've learned the hard way, because I used to have a bad habit of not paying attention to tire tread. I learned the hard way. It's so important. You do not want a flat tire. Like, I should be work. And, you get a flat tire always at the worst moment, right? But when you're spraying and you're hauling and, safe tires are so important. Going is important in a truck. Stopping is even more important. And you always want to make sure, now that I have employees, it's not just me driving the trucks. I have employees who are, moms and dads. I always want to make sure that they are the safest that they can be. And so it's just become a bigger thing to always make sure that our tire tread is a big thing. And so I don't know if everyone understands why Steve is always making sure that people are checking their tire treads quarterly. But they know it's important to me, so they do it. But I learned the hard way, that little thing about tire tread, so we'll get into it more, but it's a big thing. And it's one of those things that it just happens, you wear it out, and it can become a major issue. It's very, very dangerous. So there's other things like we don't pay attention to health, right? I didn't go to the doctors or the dentist for 5 years. My wife kept telling me, you have to go, you have to go, you have to go. I was blind to it. I was so focused on my business and working. And then when I went, I had to have all this makeup work done. So sure, my business was good, but I was not. So I was blind to the benefits of taking care of myself. Just like people are blind to the benefits of being on time, wearing your uniforms, being polite to work. And my wife reminded me constantly. So now I'm in tune to the health benefits. So we can often be blind, especially as owners, hard-driven people, super hyper-focused, and our team members can be blind to certain things in our business.
Yeah. Yeah. So, looking at it as a person unaware, how can we get them aware? How can we help them better understand the cost of these things that really serve our core values? And so the boundaries, these are the guardrails identifying, what core values do we have? What are the rules or the boundaries that we need to set up to support these core values? Where can we kind of bring these into our policies and processes? These are going to be the guardrails that keeps your business true to the value and your team true to the value. So one, bringing the right people, hiring the right people in the first place, or even, engaging the right customers that have the same values of yours. That's going to save you a lot of time and trouble on having to educate so much on, hey, why do these matter? It's going to speak to them. So they're already going to know, they're going to have their own feelings about why they matter. So it's going to be a little bit easier. And like Steve said, it's not going to tick every single box, right? Some of them may be aspiring to the same core values, but they don't really have the awareness on how to fully show up and make sure that those are followed. But there's opportunity for coaching around those. It also helps us protect like these boundaries, and having these in our business, they help us make the right decisions. They help our team make the right decisions, and they also protect your brand identity, right? So an example could be you do lawns this way, like you could do where you service customers this way. You have a system where you call the customer. You're like, hey, we're showing up at X time. We will be there today. And you make sure that, the gate's closed when you leave so their dog doesn't get out. But if somebody doesn't respect the values of your business and they're an employee, and they go there, they don't call the customer's thrown off guard, they leave the yard, they leave the gate open, then they let Sparky out and he runs through the neighborhood and their dog's now lost, right? That's going to have an impact on your brand. And if that's how you're saying you show up and you have somebody who shows up that way, that can be a problem. So this is where your values and those boundaries can really reinforce and protect your brand identity of how you do business and the people that show up that's doing your business for you.
And protecting your brand is in the top 5 CEO jobs that you're responsible for. Absolutely top 5. And by the way, I brought up the going to the doctor thing because I know that there's 2 people that listen to our podcast regularly who their wives have been telling them to go to the doctor, as my wife did, and they have not. So go to the doctor, guys. Get that checkup. But yeah, you have to protect your brand. And if you have a team member or employee that is violating your immutable laws and threatening your brand, your job is to always protect the brand. And I've had 2 conversations this year with someone that had a hard time terminating someone that was repeatedly trending on damaging their brand, and they were having a hard time terminating this person. And they trained, coach, and the person still was blind to it. And sometimes they're going to be blind to it, and you have to terminate the person. You have to find a different opportunity for them to go. And it's just your responsibility as the CEO. Now, I always say it's always safety first. I mentioned the tires earlier. And if it's a safety issue and they're continually to violating safety codes, they have to be terminated. If they not understand how to work safe, that is like rule number 1. If they're hurting, if they can jeopardize anybody else and themselves in any way, they can't understand that they cannot work there. So having these up front, and then it's just makes it so much clearer and so much easier to make sure that you can terminate because of their repeated trending behavior. So, but explain that up front to them. And then when you go to terminate them after repeated training, coaching, warnings, they're not shocked, but they still will be, most likely.
Yeah. And that's why, the effective communication when it comes to your values is so important. So we want to make sure, and this is common, right? Somebody's like, oh yeah, I created these values, these immutable laws. I have all this stuff. It's in writing and nobody understands it. They're just not getting it. And I'm saying, okay, well, tell me more about that. So we want to make sure that they get communicated, right? Where are they being communicated? So that's some of my questions is, are you communicating these in meetings? Are you communicating these in policies? Do some of your marketing materials or your website reflect what you stand for and who you are as a business? And really leveraging those all channels that you have available to you in your business, whether it's client facing or team member facing, leveraging those to communicate your values and making sure that they're aligning with your message and bringing your team in. And it's not just about like, hey, I'm going to tell you how we do things, right? It's sharing the value and why it matters. And that's going to be a lot more receptive to somebody versus just, hey, do it this way because I say so. It's, hey, we need to do it this way. And this is why we need to do it this way. And even maybe sharing a story about when it wasn't followed or that value was broken or how you did something wasn't followed and what was the outcome or the cost. So sharing a story, like, hey, we have to do things this way. This is why it's related to safety, whatever it is. But sharing a story can really have a higher impact and people could understand that better.
Absolutely, the story is the way to go, because sometimes we don't even listen when people are just reading check the checklist off to us, but people remember stories. We think in stories. I had a circumstance where I was going to one of my supervisors, and I was holding him accountable for something that his boss should have been held accountable for. And he looked at me, and I was upset. And he looked at me and he said, "Steve, you're upset with the wrong person. You should be upset with this person." And I looked at him and I said, "You're right. Thank you for holding me accountable for that." Mm-hmm. So, he had, our company Immutable Laws gave him permission to say, "Hey, I'm going to be honest with you and polite and tell you this." And I was like, I was probably not being the most polite, and he held me accountable to that. But he was honest about it. And I had to be honest back in that moment and say, "Yes, you were right." And that probably happened about 5 or 6 years ago. And I still thank him to this day for that, because it really taught me a valuable lesson. But when customers call and say, "Hey, Max was here. He was so polite. He helped me bring the trash cans up, or he, helped me clean the lawn up," or whatever it was. We share that story, when the company gets together for their weekly safety training, their tailgate training on Wednesdays. We want to share these stories. You want to share the good stories when people are winning and when they're supporting the Immutable Laws. And it lets the team know that this is what the company culture is and why it's important, and how people appreciate it and how we appreciate them when they're doing it. So always, we want to share. And I'll admit, I would only used to, when we first did it, I would only bring up the bad stuff and when people misstepped. And I will tell you from my perspective and my team's perspective, that did not go over well. So I keep that private when that happens, and I publicly share when it's working, and it has gone over much, much better.
Yeah. And some of the things you just shared, Steve, that's important, because what I'm hearing you say is as a leader, you're leading by example, right? You're setting the tone of the culture that you want the company to have. And you're also, by doing this, you're saying, hey, this is how I show up. I'm following the rules. I'm following the core values. I'm following the policy. And you're inviting your team to show up the same way. You're also giving them an example of how they themselves can do this. How they can say, hey, you're upset with the wrong person. That's important to be able to safely say in any work situation, whether it's your boss or a coworker, whoever it is. Or, I see them sharing the good things. I want to share some good things too, and not publicly throw someone under the bus. So those are some really, great examples of how to lead by example in your business. Is you're practicing what you preach, you're putting out there what you want, and we're showing our team how does this look when it shows up and serves our immutable laws.
Yeah. And, the owners are not infallible. I mean, we make mistakes. We're always learning and growing too. And I think that's, we're just human. So, and like anything, and if you've listened to our podcast, it's a journey. We're all growing, maturing our strengths and talents. And when we start something new, we might not be that good at it, but as we improve, as we continue down the journey, we improve and grow, and and people help us to learn better ways.
Yeah. And the important part of this too is like enforcing these boundaries. So once you've identified those immutable laws and you're looking at the code of conduct and you're bringing all of this into your policies and your process, we want to make sure that we continue to enforce it. So, and this can be challenging. I would say this is probably the most challenging for any business owner or leader, whether they have all of these core values or policies established or not. So, you're in the same boat regardless. But even after all the work that some of these business owners do to get this in place, they still struggle with enforcement. And so you want to make sure that you're addressing these challenges as they come up. You're having the conversations when a boundary is crossed, that you have some sort of procedure, like level of disciplinary actions, and outlining those where everybody knows, like, they're not being picked on, right? This is our company policy. This is how we handle it. So having that plan in place before you need the plan, that's really important. And it makes it easier to address any sort of violation. And it also shows the rest of the team there's no exception here. We are all equals, and the policies are equal across the board. Any repercussion or accountability is equal across the board. And that's extremely important in a culture. And coming from a leader or any manager is, hey, the rules are the same for everyone. Because when you start making different rules or putting out there because you're not following through with accountability, it's saying, hey, these boundaries can be, they're fluid. These values are fluid and they can be violated. Oh, but wait, only by some people. And that may not be you. Do you really want to find out? So that does not create a safe and supported environment. And it also doesn't say everybody matters.
Yeah, and it's a challenge. And, one of the things, I'm a big believer in practicing. So one of the things is that I believe in, you want to kind of, and you heard the phrase, dig the well before you're thirsty. You want to have these conversations before you need to. So you want to practice this. You don't want to have to wait till game time. So you want to have conversations with people like, hey, let's just go over this. Like, so let's say the immutable law is broken, right? What kind of conversation what does that look like? And how does it feel? You can do it during a one-on-one with someone, not in front of everybody. But, so let's say if this immutable law was broken, what's the conversation, right? And let's say I broke the immutable law. What's the conversation that you would have with me? Now, what's the conversation I would have with you? Because it's going to happen. Like I said, you're not going to find the perfect employee. It's going to happen. I broke the immutable law. They let me know that. So, what is that conversation? Let's have it now before it happens. So when it does happen, we're not terrified to have the conversation. We're like, okay, we're going to have our broke the immutable law conversation. We're all grown ups, right? Let's have the conversation. Let's move forward. And then you can practice it instead of like, we're going to break the glass, right? Let's break the glass. Oops, it's okay. And let's move forward. And that's like the maturing company. So that's kind of like getting it out of the way. You're just going to make a mistake. You're going to break the immutable law. I've broken them. I've been late. I have not been polite to everybody all the time, and I've been called out on it and had to back up. So, I'm not perfect. And that's why I don't expect perfect employees. So let's have these conversations ahead of time, and we don't want to wait till game time. And, it's just we're all human.
Yeah, and we had a podcast just a few podcasts ago, actually. So if you missed that one about tough conversations and accountability, definitely listen to that. This ties into that conversation and practicing it with our team, because though we may feel comfortable at certain times having these conversations, Our team may not, because they haven't had that experience. So really giving them the tools to have those conversations, and us being able to have those conversations. I think practice is key. So, we want to make sure too that and we have clients that, because we love to help clients scale and grow their business. That's what, we do, we're here for. So as you scale your company and your business grows, you need to make sure that your values and your boundaries stay relevant. So you want to look at, are they still serving their purpose in the company? Because what your company was at a $1 million company, it's not going to be the same company at 6 million. It's not going to be the same company at 12 million. So you need to continue to reconnect and be flexible and, scale your practices and your policies with your company as your company scales. And that's the difference. And I've talked about this before, between scaling and just growth, right? Growth is, it's like revenue growth. There's more customers, there's more money, there's more this, there's more problems, there's all this growth. But when you're scaling your company, you're looking at what needs to adapt and change that supports that revenue growth. How can we make sure that we stay efficient, we stay profitable, we're not overworking our team, that our policies and our values and our boundaries support all the other growth that's happening. So that's when we're being intentional to scale our business, and we're also staying true to from where we started from. Like, what are our true values? Those aren't going to change too much, right? The wording might change. Something might be more important because you're a higher revenue company. So you want to make sure that those values and those boundaries are continuing to evolve with the rest of your company and the growth of your company and your team.
Yeah, and you'll get signals. Things will change. Things won't make sense anymore. We don't have, not everyone starts at the same exact time in my company anymore, right? We have people that start at different times for different reasons. And people are like, well, he was late. Well, no, you're not he's not your direct report. He let his direct, boss know that he had to take his daughter to school. So he was going to start at a different time. Right. So the people that were counting on him for the day have been notified of his schedule. So it's okay. So where it used to be, everybody knew everybody's schedule at 5 employees, at 30 employees, it looks unfair sometimes, but we have to let people know that you need to just kind of stay in your group and stay in your lane. And that's been a little bit of a challenge for some people. Stay in your lane. Like we had a manager of another department tell the 2 managers that they needed to be doing a certain thing that they were doing. And he was like, and he's like looking around and he was going, oh, they're like we're doing right now. And he's like, oh yeah, okay. But because that's the thing he used to do. And he wasn't in it and he wasn't feeling it. And it looked different when he was managing 2 people and they're managing 10 people. The process looked different. The system looked different. And so it didn't look the same. So to him, it wasn't being done because it was a very different system when he was managing 2 versus the other managers managing 10. So it was a very funny moment. So yes, it changes as your company scales and grows.
Yeah. So really looking at these core values and immutable laws and being able to transform them or to communicate them in a way, that they identify the boundaries associated with them. This is part of your business strategy, right? So you're looking at, how do we scale our business? What needs to change? What needs to be communicated? How do we need to communicate that? And what you're really doing here is you're building a brand that your team members, that your customers, and even that your community can trust and resonate with. So you're showing up with consistency, you're being clear and transparent, and you're saying, hey, this is who we are. And you're building that foundation to support who you are. So you're really building a foundation to walk the talk that you're putting out there as a leader and as a business owner.
Absolutely. So you have your immutable laws, core values, mission, vision, purpose. People say nobody wants to work, and I'll agree with them. Nobody wants to work. Nobody wants to go to work. They want to go. They want to go stay at a company. They want to be part of something bigger than themselves. They want to live at a place. They want to work at a place. They want to live in a community of mission, vision, purpose, and of values, core values that they can believe in every day. They don't want to go to work. They want to live and work in a place that they can believe and thrive in. So if you found this discussion to be very insightful and helpful, we'd like to invite you to check out our Mind Your Own Business Retreat. At this retreat, we're going to be exploring leadership tools and challenges, giving you the time and space to work on your business and connect with other business owners and leaders. Enrollment is limited and will be closing soon. So thank you very much for joining us today on the podcast. You can check out the information for the retreat. Consider joining us. It's going to be very, very helpful to plan for the upcoming year and for the next 5 years. Thanks for listening to the Green Profit Academy Pros Podcast,
the show that digs into the challenges of growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit.